start recording, and I'll try to remember to do these as separate videos so that we can separate them on YouTube. So we're going to start with exporting a build. So let's open this up. It's pretty easy. The instructions are here. There's probably a million different Godot tutorials on how to do this. But I'm going to go over a couple different versions. I'm not going to go over every version. So if you're on Mac or on Linux, if you want to make a build for one of those platforms, you can. It's not really that different from what I'm going to go over, but I'm going to skip those today just to save a little bit of time. But I think I've done those in the past. So if you are curious about either Mac or Linux, let me know and I can give you a video to do that. All right, so I'm going to go into my game and just get ready to export. So I'm going to open up my game folder, and there's different ways to do this. I usually put it inside the game folder, but you could also put it outside the game folder. What we want is a builds folder. And what this is just a collection of different builds. When you're working on a game, a lot of times you'll have like different builds for different testing. Like if you have one that's, got some different assets or some different physics or different game mechanics, you might have different builds that you send out for people to test. We're just going to have one build of the game, but we're going to have it on multiple platforms. So it'll still be useful to have a builds folder. So I'm just going to create this builds folder, and then I'll go in there, and I'm going to have two different types of builds. So I'm going to create two more folders, like to stay nice and organized. I'm going to have a Windows build, and I'm going to have a web build. And so all of the builds have like different files that they output, and they work together in different ways. So we'll go over a couple different ones. So now I've got my folder set up. I'm ready to open my project. So I'm going to go to project.godot and open up the Godot engine and just double check that this is recording. Okay. So I'm just going to export. So you might want to check some things. You might want to go to your project settings and go to like the run settings and check some stuff in here. We probably want to set the main scene so it knows where to open. So let's set that to the menu. And you might want to, run some tests and do some things, make sure the game works before you export it. We also might want to look at the window and make sure that all the settings are correct here. And that looks pretty good. And so now we're ready to export the game. So to do that, we go to export under project and click export. And this brings up this dialog window where there's nothing here right now because we haven't added any different types of builds. So in Godot, you can build for a lot of different platforms. So we have to add different platforms, and we can set up basic default settings so that we don't have to do it over and over again. We can use the same setup. So I'm going to do Windows first because we're going to spend a little bit more time with the web build. So I'm going to, whoops, clicked on UWP accidentally. Let's go to Windows Desktop. And so you can see there's some errors here, and it's saying there's no export template. So if you haven't downloaded their export templates, you need to do that. So what I'm going to do is just click on the download button that's there. You guys will probably see that as well, unless you downloaded it when you first downloaded the game. And what I want to do is download and install. So I'm going to click on that, and that'll take a second. It's taking a little bit longer than usual, but it's not going to take too long. So once we have that downloaded, we can create a preset for our Windows build so that we can just do a build really quickly, and it'll have the same parameters. When you're working on the game, as I mentioned, you're going to make a lot of builds for testing purposes. We've been using just the editor to play the game and test the game, but normally you want to test a build so you'll have a sense of what it looks like to an actual player. So it says export templates are installed and ready to use, so we can close, and now we just have to go back to export. Okay, so now we have our Windows desktop, and there's some parameters here. I don't think we really need to change anything here. Let me see if there's any parameters we want to look at. You can export different resources. So this is set to export all resources in the project. And so that's what I'm going to set. If your project is really, really large for some reason, you might want to set this to something else so that you don't have to include all the files. So if I set this to export selected scenes and dependencies, then I can just select the scenes that I want to export, or I can select all of the scenes, and it'll go through and read what's in all the scenes and then export along everything that's needed. So this isn't really necessary, but this is something that you could do if for some reason your game build is like really, really big and it's too big to distribute. You could do something like this. You can also select all of the resources individually. So I could like go through the audio and the font and the scenes and the scripts and choose everything that I want to go in there. And that might be useful if you have like, I don't know, some folder that you don't want to include in the game. You might want to use that. But I'm going to export all of the resources. And I think that's everything that we need to do. And so there's a couple different buttons down here. One is to export a zip, and that's what you would use if you wanted to export like an update to a game that already exists. But that's not what we're doing. We want to export the project. So we're going to use the export project button. And then we're just going to go into the builds folder and go into Windows. And you can see we can name the file here. So the name of my project is just my game. And so it's calling it mygame.exe. So that's the Windows executable. If you want it to be something else, you can change that. I'm going to click save. And one thing I didn't mention is the icon. So let's actually take a look at that, and then we'll replace the icon. So now if I go to my builds folder and go to Windows, here's my game. And you can see it has the default Godot icon because I didn't replace the icon in my project. So I'll do that in a second. But you can also see there's a mygame.pck file here. And you need both of those files for this game to work. So if you give somebody just the exe file, they won't be able to run it. So these files have to be sitting next to each other. So the way I usually do a Windows build is I make an archive of this folder and distribute that. But if we double click on this, we should be able to run the game. And it looks like it's working, so that's pretty cool. So everything seems to be working pretty good. We can just test this a little bit. There's our dialogue. So everything looks like it's set up correctly. So let's replace the icon and then do another build. So for my icon, all I really have to do is I can either set the icon in project settings, or I can replace this file right here. So let's go into my sprites, and I'll just use my avatar. So I'm just gonna copy this and go back to my game, and I'm going to delete my icon. So I'm going to delete this, and I'll delete the import file as well. And then I'm just going to paste this avatar, and I'll rename this icon. So that'll just use the basic Godot setup. You can see it's reloaded here. But if you wanted to just choose a file, you could go to project settings. And let's see if we can search under icon. Under config, you can set the path to the icon if you just want to choose an image from your folder. So the default is just icon.png, so we'll leave that and export again. So I'm just going to export, and I'm going to set everything exactly the same, and it's just going to overwrite the files that I have here. So I'm going to click save. It says file exists, overwrite, okay. And that takes a second. And let's go back to builds, and here's Windows. And didn't use my icon. Wonder if that's a different setting. Let's actually try deleting this and then rebuilding it. That might be the issue. But let's also check the project setting. It might be like the splash, boot splash. No, that's the image it shows when the game is loading. So I don't think that's the issue. Although you could put an image there if you wanted. Maybe I would put like my character line there. Okay, let's try exporting again. Export project. And let's see. Okay. Okay, we still have the same icon. I'm not really sure what the deal with that is. I will figure it out later. I'm not gonna spend too much time debugging that right now, but it should be a little avatar. There's that background though. Let's see. I don't know if this is like a Windows thing. The export setting. Wonder if they're... Okay, I'll figure that out later. Not sure why the icon didn't change. But anyway, that's our Windows build. We're just gonna leave that there for now. Now we're gonna make the web build. Or actually, before we do that, I want to archive this. So if I'm gonna send this to somebody, I want to archive it so that makes it easier. If I send them 2 files, they might like miss something. So we can send them the zip file, and then when they extract it, it'll have both of the files. So we have to make sure those files are next to each other. So that's my Windows build. Now let's make our web build. So I'll go back to project, go to export, and add a new template. And for the web, it's HTML5. And I don't think we really need to set anything here. It has some of the same settings, but I think we can leave all of this stuff the same. Oh, there is an icon thing here for extra icons. Maybe I'll choose the icon for this. I'm just gonna put the same one. I'm gonna be lazy and not create the extra files. And then we wanna set the export path. So I'm gonna click on here, go to builds, and go to web, and click save. And so this generates a lot more files. And one thing that we wanna make sure, where it says build/web.html, we wanna make sure that this is index.html, because when we publish this on itch.io, it's only gonna work if we have this index.html page. So you might remember index.html from MMP 100 or any other web development or web design class you may have taken. It's essentially the first page that a website will look for. And so we really need to have that, or else it won't work on itch. And it has to be a lowercase I. So it has to be formatted exactly like you see it here. So I'm gonna click save and go back to the folder and go to the web. And so now you can see the project here. So this has a lot more files because a website has more stuff going on. So we have our HTML page. We have the icon here, the index.js file. This is the pack file. That's just like the pack file we have that has all of our assets in it. There's a few other things here. This does the audio. This is the game engine in this WASM file here. So that's everything that I need. And we're going to do the same thing with the web build. I'm just going to right click on this and I'm going to compress to a zip file. So we're not actually going to be able to preview the web build. If I go in and open this index.html, I'm going to get an error. And so you can see there's an error here, which is because I'm just running the file. I need to be running this off a server. I'm not going to go into this right now, but if you've taken a web development class and you've used something like brackets or Sublime Text or other things to create a server, you can do that and run the file that way. But I'm going to skip that for now because we're just focused on exporting. So we're basically done here. We have our 2 builds, and now we're going to put them on itch.io so that we can distribute them. Quick note, if for some reason you don't want to put them on itch.io, you just want to distribute the builds as is, you can do that. You could submit these as a file. There's a couple different ways you could do that. You could put them, if you go to the Open Lab, let me log in real quick. So you can't upload files like this directly to WordPress, but the Open Lab does have, if I go to my profile, and go to the course. So I'll go to my courses and let's see, spring 2022. There's a files section here where you can upload files. So you can see I did this as a test earlier this year. You can go upload a new file and you can choose your Windows build. So mine is in here. Builds, Windows, and click open, and I'll just say my game Windows build and click submit. And so this is a way that you can host the file without having to use, let's see, is it going? Is there error? Okay, it's uploaded. Oh, it looks like I did it a couple times. Whoops. Let's delete a couple of these. So now you have a link if you want to use it. This will go to the build and it'll download directly into my Finder. So if you don't want to publish on itch, you can still use the Open Lab to publish your game. And that way you can send it to people and they can download it and play it. Okay, so in the next video, we will make an itch profile and upload our build on itch. And then we'll be able to distribute the game. So I'm going to stop recording.